business encounters. The following differences may make you or break you. One must be aware of those differences. They are political differences. For example, the political system in Singapore may be vastly different from those of Mexico. In some governments, politicians can make drastic changes in overall strategies dealing with foreign entrepreneurs. Policy differences. Tax incentives and policies for foreign investment may differ from region to region. For example, China at the moment is anxious to attract foreign investment and joint ventures. Attitudinal differences. Attitudes towards so-called foreigners also differ immensely from area to area. Communication differences can create difficulties. For example, yes may indicate an acknowledgement of the message, but not an agreement or affirmation of the message. Standard of living differences. There is great disparity between developing countries and developed countries in standard of living. For example, bath facility, drinking water, food preparation may differ greatly. One may get sick because of the differences in foods and climate. Work ethics differences. In Japan, for example, working overtime without compensation is not an exception, but the rule. Next, one must develop cultural and social literacy. Find out what is acceptable. For example, is it acceptable to conduct business without going to dinner or drinking? Or is it part of the package? Learn about what is offensive. Is it appropriate to bring a spouse to a business dinner when your counterpart does not? Next, find out what is tabooed. In some countries and cultures, discussion of religious practice is not appropriate. Check out what is preferred. For example, what to order for dinner and what is preferred may need to be investigated. What is the social customs of an area? For example, exchanging cigarettes in China is a gesture of friendship and goodwill. If one does not smoke, what should one do? What is considered the order of hierarchy in greeting a group? By age, seniority, job rank, gender, etc. Next, utilize and maximize human resources for technology and capital transfers. A number of United States companies have been quite successful in working in their Hungarian counterparts in technology and capital transfers, largely because these companies learn to utilize Hungarian Americans in their workforce. Likewise, big companies such as Hewlett-Packard and Motorola have had huge successes in China due to the fact that they knew how to work with the local people and utilize Chinese Americans to facilitate transactions. The idea of localization must be considered in the overall personnel management of company. Finally, a word of caution for using the translator's interpreters. The need of careful training and monitoring and screening is important. They need to have high qualifications and professional ethics. The training process needs to include briefing and debriefing. In my book, Assessing Asian Language Performance, I gave some guidelines for training interpreters. The interpreters need extensive training so that they are well aware of the content or subject matter. Meetings must be pre-planned, and they need to have a briefing, and after the meeting, a debriefing. If possible, use the same person and develop a working relationship with him or her. Be sure to use your own judgment and own observation in the process. Sometimes the interpreter is not transmitting the right messages and can really create a problem. To work well with an interpreter, the following points are very useful. Speak distinctly at a normal pace. Keep sentences short and simple. Provide enough time for organization. Avoid excessive use of functional words. Ask if the interpreter needs clarification and elaboration. Use abstract words sparingly. In summary, to be a global entrepreneur and to be competitive, the following qualities are needed. One must be at once a generalist and specialist. In addition, one must support and exhibit innovation and critical thinking skills. He or she must be adaptive, be able to adapt and be creative, and be understanding of diversity. The global entrepreneur must possess social and cultural competence, cross-cultural communicative competence, and team-based interpersonal skills. In conclusion, the global entrepreneur needs to possess the following attitudes and values. He or she must be a lifelong learner, must exhibit a tolerance for ambiguity, must embrace diversity, and respect and care for individuals. Finally, he or she must exhibit social, environmental, and global responsibility. One necessary piece in gaining and maintaining the competitive edge is to continue learning and to commit to lifelong learning. The global entrepreneur must know what questions are pertinent and where to find the answers to those questions. He or she must be patient and have the tolerance of multiple perspectives and possible ambiguity in negotiations and transactions. Furthermore, one essential quality is the ability and appreciation to embrace diversity in terms of gender, age, language, cultural, geographical region, religion, political systems, and in general, the different ways of life. The next ingredient may sound redundant and unnecessary, yet it is the fundamental premise on which to build the concept of a global entrepreneur. That is, the utter respect for individual and individual differences. Finally, as the globe is shrinking and as human beings deplete the resources of environment, one must be mindful of the social and environmental consequences of one's action. Social consciousness must be placed very high on the list of priorities. Cutting costs does not mean sacrificing the principles of environmental protection. Making a profit cannot be based on the exploitation of fellow human beings. A successful entrepreneur must be cognizant of the social, cultural, and environmental consequences of his or her decisions, and honor the need to prevent further damages to our Mother Earth and the inhabitants on this great earth. Finally, I want to wish the best in your future endeavors and ventures. Good luck and good health to all of you. Gracias.
Okay, now we need you to...
Thank you, Dr. Cheng. Let us continue with the second question and answer session.
Les agradecemos sus excelentes preguntas, pero se nos acaba el tiempo. Así es que les pedimos, por favor, que hagan
Thank you
las
for your
preguntas
excellent
y ojalá
questions,
una sola
and
cada
please continue with your questions. Our first question comes from Sanyo Electronics. It's coming via fax. How important is it to have good communication skills to do business in another culture, and what are the most important aspects in your opinion?
I think communication is the most important in any human transaction. The reason why we're human beings is because we can use languages and nonverbal skills to communicate. So I would put it on very high on our priority list to communicate effectively. What are some of the aspects of a good communicator? I think first, a mastery of the language or languages you're dealing with. An idea of how to make sure that your points are put across in a simple, logical, and most understandable manner. And to do that, I think one may need some training, but certainly one can develop and nurture the development of cross-cultural communication.
Dr. McClain?
I would only add something that's of particular importance, perhaps for Americans and maybe some other cultures as well, and that is the ability to listen. When one is communicating, particularly North Americans tend to talk too much and not listen enough, and the ability to listen and receive what your partner is sending to you is essential. Of course, you have to have the technical knowledge or the product-specific knowledge that will be successful in the marketplace, but unless you can communicate with your partners, you can't actualize that knowledge and bring a product to the market. And to do that, you definitely have to listen to what the other side's saying.
And now we are going to another question coming from the university in Santo Domingo, Caribbean. How does success manifest, and what are the indicators of multicultural entrepreneurs, of this success, indications of success?
Okay, success, of course, can be measured in different ways. A person who is successful may be successful in intercultural, interpersonal ways. But for business, I think the one index for success is that you're not only reaching your business goals, but may go beyond your business goals. I would consider that the goal settings are very important, and if you can reach the goals, you are successful. For a multicultural person, however, to be successful as a multicultural entrepreneur, one needs to know that the feedback coming from your multicultural partners are important. If they say that they are able to work with you and they are willing to continue a long-term relationship, that means you are successful.
The only thing I might highlight is going back to my presentation and the videos that were therein about Coca-Cola, Toyota, and Flexengate, the supplier to Toyota. All of those companies were successful multicultural entrepreneurs. They were successful because they had advanced their products in the market, consumers accepted their products, they had implemented a new way of production in the case of Toyota and Flexengate. It seems to be how you tell whether you're ultimately successful in a business setting. It's not quite the same as socially being multiculturally successful, but in business you really have to be more productive and make more profit, I think, to be successful.
Vamos ahora a Brasil. La siguiente participación es
And now we're going to Brazil. This is coming from KTV Communications, Rio de Janeiro. Good afternoon. Multicultural entrepreneur and all the multicultural managers are very sophisticated today in this day and age. What happens with multiculturalism at the level of technicians and lower echelon workers?
Yes, the multicultural entrepreneurs that I personally know are very sophisticated. They do have the ways and means to communicate, to negotiate, and to do a lot of intercultural transactions. Now, for those individuals who are not higher up in the decision-making piece, one way of empowering such people would be for the upper level management to share such information, to provide opportunities for middle management people or technical people to have the opportunities to communicate when their partners come over to visit. Also, there should be opportunities for them to travel abroad to their partnership countries. I think this is very important because then the people in the company and in the industry will share this information and be empowered through this process. I think a good manager will always make sure information is delivered and shared, and power is also delivered and shared.
It's good to have a sense of history here, too. The Nike Corporation used to have 35 employees, and when I spoke with Neil Lauritsen, the head of their Asia Pacific operations a few years ago, he said, you know, we used to be a small company. We used to be a very American company, and now we have operations all over the world. That took a long time to happen, but the reason it happened was because of just what Dr. Cheng is saying. The management understood the need to transmit throughout the organization this sense of being a multicultural person.
And now we're going to Mexico State, and this question is coming from the National Autonomous University, Mexico, Hispanic American University. Thank you. Good morning. Do you think that the multicultural entrepreneur requires the fifth discipline, TQM, and an application of equipment back for his organization or her organization?
I am not one to answer a question about TQM, although I know that good leaders must understand the importance of the total quality management. My feeling is that this question may be better answered by Dr. McClain, and you might want to help out. Mm-hmm.
Well, there's no question that Peter Senge's book on the fifth discipline has been a very influential one, and it's really very much on target. What that's about, however, is not about being multicultural or monocultural. That's really about being a good manager, and I think that's something that anyone who operates globally will have to do. They will have to be able to emulate best practice in management. That includes paying attention to quality, as American steel and auto companies did not for such a long time, and that includes being more careful in documenting your processes so that you can control costs and re-engineer where necessary. All of that is about being a good manager. Being a good multicultural manager is going beyond that to be able to work with people and communicate with people who come from other cultures. Both are important.
And now this question is coming from Acapulco. My name is José Luis Pineda, and I have a question regarding the new theories. And what are the relations between the new entrepreneur and their workers and the global organizations? How do they divide labor? And what is the benefit for the laborer, for the worker, in the middle of all these changes?
A recent story in Southern California ought to lend a good example for all of us. The new entrepreneur was able to share the profits with all his workers. And to me, profit sharing is very, very important. The more incentives you can give to your workers, the more they're able to buy into your philosophy. And also shared vision and shared goals. I think that is very important. I think the new entrepreneur should not be the one who is making the $1 million. Rather, his workers will be able to also make $70,000 along with his profit.
I would agree that this is a challenging time for workers. There's no question about it, especially older workers who have difficulty acquiring the new skills that are needed to operate in the new ways. But I do think that this is an area in which there really is no turning back, because there are many, many workers around the world who are willing to learn these skills and to take their products to the higher level. Workers that choose to be left behind, unfortunately, will see their standard of living decline. It's sometimes a harsh choice whether to change and perhaps improve and take a chance, or to stay the same and perhaps suffer at the hands of global competition. I really think there's really no choice for workers. I think they have to embrace the new environment and try to upgrade their skills. And in so doing, if they're successful, they'll increase their standard of living. But it's certainly a difficult time, no question about it.
Now we're going to read a fax coming from Paraguay. The question is, we all know how costly and difficult it is to train someone to function in another language or learn another culture. Should we then always prefer to take advantage of regional and national human resources? Doesn't this lead us to too much diversity and lack of a specific image as a multinational organization?
A multinational organization has a multicultural image. A multicultural organization is a global organization. In such an organization, there should be many faces, there should be many voices, and there should be many perspectives. Of course, they all have to share the common goals and visions of the multicultural company. So for me, by having many faces, many languages, and many cultures, we are not only able to enable the company to do business and become more competitive, we're also adding richness to the composition of the company. I see in the future more and more multinational companies with multicultural staff.
I think the caller has a good point, though, that there are some limits to the benefits of diversifying and having a whole range of cultures. But I would just recall the European experience. For some time, the Europeans thought that if they unified the common market into something more concrete, the European Union we call it now, that would be enough to get all the benefits of economies of scale and so forth and dynamism. But the Europeans forgot to understand that elsewhere in the Americas and also in Asia there were competitive inroads being made there, and just being pan-European wasn't enough. So I think the strategy of regionalism might have worked in an earlier day. But in our day, I think there's really no choice but to be global or local. There's really no in-between.
Saludamos ahora a la primera participación de los Estados Unidos en el programa de las
And we now welcome Las Cruces, New Mexico. This is a question coming from New Mexico State University. This is our site in the United States.
We only live 45 miles from the Mexican border, yet most people here are monoculture. How can you motivate people and businesses to be bicultural?
We only are 17 minutes away from Tijuana, Mexico. And how can we motivate San Diegans to be multicultural? I think you can look at it from a number of dimensions. One, the city of San Diego has a particular purpose to exist. The mayor of the city, for example, has said repeatedly that we are a multicultural city and that we border the Mexican border, and that is an asset for us. So coming from the city government and from the press, we hear about the binational, bicultural richness of this area. That's very important. Also, in people-to-people kinds of relationships, we can cultivate sister city relationships and neighboring city relationships. This is very important. Anytime you have any enrichment opportunities, it is always through people-to-people. I would hope that in your city, 40 miles away from the Mexican border, that you will absorb the richness from Mexico and will benefit from the bicultural, binational experiences.
Well, in Hawaii, of course, we're somewhat geographically challenged, being something like 2,500 miles from the nearest landmass anywhere. But people often expect our population to be multicultural because it is such a mix of many different cultures. There must be 6 or 8 or 10 major cultures represented there. But in fact, there is a segment of our population that is very provincial. And it has been provincial in the past because it's been able to be provincial and still earn a decent living. The motivation in Hawaii these days for becoming multicultural is in fact an economic motivation, the realization that unless we reach out to Asia to the mainland here in the United States and to Latin America, our economic future will not be as bright. So for us, the motivator is economics, and that may be the case as well where you are.
Greetings to Tecate, Baja California, also in our neighbors here. This is coming from Baja California, Secati. What would an executive need to develop a successful company within a culture where there is not enough identity, and that he only knows from the different communication media, not directly?
There is then the necessity for the person or the persons who are decision makers or who share decision making to take the opportunity to travel. There is nothing that you can do to substitute the actual contact with people in the outside world. Even though you may be talking about a border city or somewhere far away in the Pacific Ocean, you still need to make that first step. It may be a small step the first time around, but as you are able to venture into the world, you will learn through people contact how to work better and how to be able to think multiculturally.
Yes, I think Dr. Ching has hit the nail right on the head. I think that's essential. And it's really up to the leader to expose his community to the global community.
And this is the last one from Lima, Peru, engineering faculty of National University. Greetings to all of you. Dr. Cheng has said that the new that a very important development for development is this contact, and that we must invest in innovation and education. Could you explain to us, in your experience, how this training of this new global entrepreneur, global leader, at what level of education, at what stage does it get done? At the high school level, university, postgraduate, or what stage? And in the case of a specific country, for instance, where should you start? In what country, for instance, could it be started?
Well, if you are situated in Lima, Peru, of course, your neighboring part in the Americas would be the United States and Canada. I think there is some geographical advantage to travel to the United States and Canada to learn about these countries. But in terms of the lifelong educational process that I talked about earlier in my presentation, I think we can expose to our youngsters at a very early age about the sense of borderlessness in the education, and also to reach out through the world through a lot of reading, exposure to different news clippings, and so on and so forth. At a higher level, for example, in college or in graduate school, of course, we are going to deal with more in-depth understanding and analysis of stories that we can share about successes and failures. And most importantly, to cultivate and nurture the idea that it is a lifelong process, and lifelong learning is the most important ingredient in our success.
Thank you very much. We have run out of time. Thank you for all your excellent questions. Thank you, Dr. McClain and Dr. Cheng. We hope that you have enjoyed participating in this video conference. We will continue transmitting programs on the latest in management systems techniques and global competitiveness. We invite you to participate on March 13 in the next program of our series entitled The Multinational Virtual Organization: Guidelines for Adopting Information Technologies. For additional information on the International Training Center's programs this year, please consult your participants' manuals, where you will find the dates and specific topics for these. Also, if you are interested in participating in training programs, which will be offered by the International Training Center, such as those on ISO 14000 and the International Business and Telecommunications, please contact the center by letter, phone, or fax. On behalf of all of us who collaborate with the International Training Center, I thank you for your participation and interest in today's program. Thank you, and see you soon.